People who have been in a coma, what was it like from your perspective? Did you know you were in a coma? I was in a coma for about 2 weeks following a cardiac arrest as a teen. I was technically dead for over an hour. In fact, people often ask me if I could hear my family talking to me, or if I was dreaming. The answer is no. There is a huge hole in my memory beginning about 2 weeks before the coma through a week after waking up. And waking up is in quotes, because I would wake up, ask a bunch of semi-incoherent questions, fall back under, then wake up again, and ask the exact same questions, in the exact same order, repeat 6 or 7 times. The coma was not even blackness. It just does not exist. I remember having the hardest time believing it was actually mid-October when the last day I remembered was late September. Radiolab recently did a podcast loosely arranged around the theme loops. One of the stories they tell is of a woman who experiences some sort of medical event that causes her memory to essentially reset after a few minutes. Her daughter recorded her waking up and having the exact same conversation over and over and over. Same questions, same responses, same jokes. Repeat. Absolutely fascinating stuff. We know so little about the human brain. I was in a coma for 3 days following a serious cycling accident, medically induced. I woke up with zero recollection of why I was there, or what was said, while I was out. It is easily the scariest situation I've found myself in, but I can't say I remember it. I woke up to my mom and dad in the hospital with me, and my body in traction of some sort, and that was way scarier to me. That sucks. Traction is terrifying. My ex-husband was in it. If you don't mind me asking, what the hell is traction? You know those things that lift your legs up like in cartoons, where they're all wrapped up in bandages with the pullers and stuff? Yeah, that. The person I knew in a coma was in it for about 3 weeks, and had no recollection of being in a coma. The doctor was saying his name real loud, and he finally woke up one day. The doctor asked him if he was, insert real name. The patient said yes, and whom do I have the pleasure of speaking to? Back to the doctor. WHOMST the fuck, sir. I had a seizure, and was in a medically induced coma for 3 days, when I was 17. To be honest, I don't remember anything. I remember fading in and out of the anesthesia trying to pull my breathing tube out, and in that my hands were restrained to the bed so I couldn't. When I woke up and was coherent, I couldn't recall anything from actually being in the coma. They had even moved me to a hospital over 100 miles away. It was really just nothing but black. No dreams, no lights, no voices, just nothing. About 3 to 4 days for me too. Sounds like shorter comas are blackouts with no time perception, and long comas of 2+ weeks results in weird dream/nightmarish state. Just an observation from this thread and others like it. Dunno. I was in a coma for 11 days. Severe brain injury. I don't remember being in a coma or waking up from a coma. I lost several years of memories prior to the coma, and my brain didn't really start to retain information again until 6 weeks after I came out of the coma. I'm told that my personality changed afterwards. I had to rebuild most areas of my life. It sucked, but it was probably a good thing. Although I'd be lying if I said I never wondered what my life would be like if I'd never had a coma. I also heard of daughter of a friend who had her personality change like 100%. Just was like a totally different person as far as interests and demeanor and etc. Her boyfriend didn't make it out of the accident, and when they told her, she was just so sympathetic to his parents, but didn't seem to feel any remorse for herself, like he was someone she had never met, even though they had been together for years and she remembered that they had dated. I wonder if she remembered that they dated, but she lacked the emotional connection to those memories that she would have had without the injury. Very interesting. When I was a kid, my best friend got hit by a car at age 12. She was in a coma for I think a little over a year. She said she felt like she was asleep, but was most freaked out when she woke up and saw that she had gone through puberty while in the coma. Some would consider not having to consciously live through puberty to be a good thing. But like, imagine waking up with a different body. Even crazier, waking up with a different mind. Puberty does add to the mind as well. So can getting hit by a car. I was in a medically induced coma following a self-inflicted gunshot wound. I don't remember much, but my family described moments of me appearing to be awake. Most notable, an apparent attempt at humor. Apparently they put these mids on my hands to prevent me from ripping my ventilation tubes out over and over, but I pretended they were my lobster claws. I have no recollection, but it's a real me move. may not mean much coming from a stranger, but I'm glad you survived. It means everything. My girlfriend of 6 years and sort of fiancé was in a severe car crash when she was 16. Both of her best friends died instantly. She was the only survivor, but they didn't think she would make it. She was in a coma for 9 months. She was in what is called a waking coma. She retained normal periods of sleep and overnight wakefulness, but no higher brain functions. Here are some things about her experience. She doesn't have any memories of the year prior or the year and a half-ish after her coma, and obviously no memories of the car crash. She suffered at B, and when she first got out of the coma she would get naked and sexual with people and anger very easily. These are common problems of people who suffer at B. She went back to school after the coma, but her brain was still healing a lot. She was held back another year, because her brain was still not retaining anything. Today she is a wonderful, bright 30-year-old with a college degree. She has a slight speech impediment, gets frustrated easier than most, and it took her a while to get driving down. Honestly, she still scares the hell out of me when she drives, but there are worse drivers out there. Pretty bold having your GF and fiancé in the same car. Sort of fiancé. He proposed, but, ick now, she forgot. After being in a really bad accident that left one of my good friends, the driver, brain dead, they put me into a chemically induced coma for under a week, to prevent brain damage due to swelling. When I first woke up, my memory was much better than it was as it gradually faded in the days to come. I have a journal my mother recorded things in, and I recalled many things I shouldn't have been able to immediately after waking up. Today, I have very little memory of it all, but I can definitely say that having positive people around you definitely helps when you're in a situation like that. If you have a friend in this situation, don't disregard them. Even though your life has moved on, they may wake up one day, and in their mind, not a day has passed since the last conversation they had with you. Thanks for sharing that last part, right in the feels. I'm not sure where I read it, but a girl talked about her experience and she mentioned that it was like going in and out of sleeping/dreaming. Just when she would feel like she was waking up, she could hear parts of conversations or the TV, but she would slip right back to sleeping. She also said when people would clean her she could feel them touch sensitive parts of her like her armpit and butthole area. I'm an inpatient phlebotomist, and even though some of my patients are sedated I still always introduce myself and say I'm here to draw some blood, just in case they could hear me. I like that you introduce yourself to sedated patients. That's not a bad idea. It's never a bad thing to have a steady routine when in hospitals. I felt like it helped me not make mistakes. I also like that your wholesome comment included a butthole area. It impressed me because it's so respectful. Good job document. Mine was only 2 days, but for me, it was just like being asleep. When I woke up I had no idea I was in a coma. Sleep, coma, hotel, Trivago. Okay. I was put in an induced coma when I was 9 years old after a pretty bad car accident which left me with a fractured skull. All I remember is a bad dream about having a bad headache, and hearing my older sister telling everyone, including my parents, to get the fuck out of her way because she wanted to see me. I found out later that this was on the night it happened, and they were trying to calm her down before she saw me. Sounds like a good big sister. We have our ups and downs, but honestly, she is the best. I could not have asked for a better sister. Make sure she knows that. About 3 years ago I overdosed on sleeping pills, and it caused me to go into a coma. I remember a lot of what my family said, but one thing stood out. My dad's voice. I remember him saying I love you, and I know you miss your mom and brother, but I still need you. I was in that damn coma for a month, and I woke up 5 minutes after he said that. I couldn't speak, because I had tubes down my throat, and I was non-verbal for a while after, because the pills messed up my brain. I don't know how I remembered, but I remembered the slang sign for I love you. I still struggle with suicide, but anytime I think about it, I remember what my dad said, and I try to do the opposite of what I was going to do. Hey pal, I'm glad you made it back. I hope things get better for you. Thanks. Who I can answer this one. I was in a medically induced coma for 2 weeks. About 3 months ago, I had open heart surgery. It didn't go well. Had trouble coming off the ventilator, so they just put me in a cum. to try to give me time to heal. I had nightmares the entire time from the medicine they were using to knock me out. I thought I had been kidnapped by a nurse and was a victim of sex trafficking. I thought my drug addict aunt had her friends rob my sister and her husband, killing my brother-in-law and one of their children. And I thought I was constantly being grabbed by people under my bed. It was not fun. I can't say that I knew I was in a coma or anything. I'm usually one of those people that when I have a bad dream, I can tell myself it is just a dream and wake myself up in order to end it. This was not like that. I was convinced it was all really happening. Oh, I'm so sorry. That sounds horrific. I was in a coma for 3 days after an emergency C-section. Thanks eclampsia. They actually lost me for a couple of minutes after they delivered my twin boys. I remember hearing the sound of my dad crying close by. I could hear people talking around me, but any time I would try to focus on what I thought I was seeing, it was like looking in a kaleidoscope. Damn. That is intense. Right after giving birth, did you remember what happened afterward? I'm so glad you pushed through it. Op delivered. Well. 4 days or so. Traumatic brain injury. I knew time was passing, but not sure how fast. I can remember people being in the room with me. Eyes were taped shut, and people taking. A few years ago my dad was in a medically induced coma for about 2 weeks. Everyone thought he was completely unconscious the whole time, until he woke up and started mentioning conversations people had around him while he was under. This even surprised the doctors. He said that from his perspective it was like he was asleep most of the time, but he would occasionally wake up and could hear what was going on around him without being able to move or do anything, before he would eventually drift back to sleep. My husband was in a coma for a couple weeks. He got pneumonia his freshman year of college. The coma was medically induced because he had a really bad immune system or something. He told me all he remembered was waking up really confused and with a really full beard. AMD when he did wake up, he was still in a lot of pain, so they gave him a ton of medicine and it made him kinda high, and he wasn't all there when his friends visited. I was in a coma for 3 days. Unlike most people, I definitely knew time was passing, but didn't know I was in a coma. I kept having weird hallucinations about running a restaurant with my brother, and I kept getting confused and wondering where I was and why I wasn't managing the restaurant. I've never worked at a restaurant, and I'm not sure why my brother was involved. Life didn't feel real for a few months following waking up. I remember what put me in a coma. Then I remember being unconscious, but hearing my parents' hallucinations. And then nothing for 5 weeks. My next memory is at home, and my doctor visiting me. What were the hallucinations like? Literally big crayons falling from the sky lol. Crayola man. Big crayon guy. A friend of mine was in a 6-month coma after an accident. Afterwards he made sure to tell everyone around him to talk to people in a coma, because they can hear you. But he noted that they should always tell the person in a coma what happened, where they are, and what's happening to them, because he said that his moments of lucidity were mixed with some truly horrifying dreams, and he had trouble distinguishing between what was real and what were dreams. He said he just wanted to be told what was real and what was happening. This gives me a new fear and a new request I have just in case. I'll be sure to tell you that you died and you're in purgatory while your sins are being judged, but, oh boy, it's not looking for you, pal. Haha, just kidding. You're just in that black moment when the GIF ends and you wake up in a wooden cart. I was out for 45 days. No white light, no tunnel, nothing. Woke up and couldn't remember who I was. For 6 months. Never really fully recovered, so I just started life again. Turns out I'm a completely different person than I was, and that is a really good thing. I get memories now and then. They aren't pleasant. A woman came and sat by my bed for 6 weeks. Turns out she was my ex-lover. I couldn't remember her. Didn't recognize my mother. // afterward. This is the second time in my life I have related this much about my life publicly, and it has been good, and at the same time really painful. Thanks to everyone for being kind. I wrote this story 7 months ago, and published it in the lounge, and I really hurt myself doing it. This time I wanted to share about the life afterwards, and I hope it has been of some benefit to others that struggle with mental issues. This place saves lives, gives hope and guidance to millions of people, and I feel lucky to be part of the community. Despite what they show on TV, amnesia like this is fairly rare. Tell us more. Total amnesia is a thing of movies and bad plot devices. I have sporadic memory that is often tied to smell and colors. My grandma had terminal pancreatic cancer and stage 3 lung or liver cancer. Can't remember. She went into a coma. When her body was preparing for death, I know she could hear us OBC. When I was in the room by myself with her, I was telling her how much I loved her, and she grunted and smiled. Jesus. This thread is more fearsome than most of r/novelette posts. I know this will get buried, but I'll post my experience anyway. I went to the hospital with renal failure and a pulse ox reading of 32. I remember the nurse saying my pee looked like root beer, and when she stabbed my arm to give me N4, all she said was "oh." My arm got really warm and my dad moved my head so I wouldn't see how much blood was coming out. Next thing I know, I'm in a hospital bed, tearing through the desert at 60+ miles per hour. Nothing but me and a hospital bed. No motor. Nothing. Just cruising through the desert. I'd see all sorts of weird things. Most specifically was Ronald McDonald. I saw him all the time. Then my hospital bed would come to a screeching halt and I'd be in the living room of someone I knew. Grandma. Good friends. Former coaches. Basically any living room I had spent time in with someone I cared about. The weird thing was the living rooms were always 3 walled. One wall was missing, and beyond that wall was a barren desert. We would talk for a while about God knows what. Then I'd be pulled back into the desert cruising at 60 miles per hour again. It happened over and over again. Sometimes the same living rooms would reappear, but almost all of them were unique. When I came out of the coma, everyone kept commenting how good my hair looked. I couldn't figure out why they kept saying that, so I finally asked my mom how long I had been asleep. She said 13 days, and I had cards and flowers from all these people whose living rooms I'd been visiting in my coma. It was surreal, and I definitely can't explain it, especially since most of the cards came from people who weren't allowed to visit me in intensive care and were sending well wishes in writing, not in person. But did your hair actually look good, or were they being nice? I also want to know this. My mom was in a coma, and she recently told me it was horrible. She was in a wreck that killed her technically 5+ times. Heart stopped, and she said she could feel all the pain. Hear the doctors yelling that she was being coded. She said she thought to herself, wow, whoever that it must be dying, and then realizing it was her. She was trying to scream and tell them she was alive, but nothing ever came out. Semicolon. My friend was in a coma about 10 years ago for roughly 3 weeks. Car accident. When he woke up, we visited him, and when I was alone with him, he told me it was like a lucid dream. The real world was gone, and he felt like he was in a world he could create himself for years. He was dead serious too. He talked on and on about how he had a slight understanding that he was not in the real world anymore, and that he thought he might be in heaven. About how he felt like he was actually dying, and his last few seconds just stretched on and on forever. He said that's what it felt like. He mentioned that he could fly in the coma dream, and that it was amazing. He spent a little while in the hospital, then went home. Did physical therapy for about 2 weeks before killing himself with pain pills and vodka. People thought the pain was too much, that it was an accidental overdose, or that the therapy and the accident made him feel helpless and depressed. Honestly, I think he wanted back into his lucid dream world. The way he talked about it was like the best thing he ever experienced. Did not expect this to take that dark turn. I did. Sometimes the contrast between a fantastic dream and your dismal real life can be really overwhelming. It's not an unfamiliar feeling to me. Happy love hugs. Death and destruction. I held my grandfather's hand while he was comatose on his deathbed. I spoke in his ear my feeling toward him and the effect he had on my life. I swear he could hear me because he squeezed my hand during some of the more heartfelt things that I said to him. Even typing this now strongly reminds me of that experience, and it's making me cry. People can hear you. Never lose the chance to say what you need to say to them. IQ nurse here. We have patients that come back and tell us that it was pretty dreamlike. They also remember specific voices and some recall snippets of conversations in the room. Many of them experience memory problems or have vivid dreams for months afterwards. A lot of them get diagnosed with PTSD afterwards as well. Copy paste from an answer 7 MO ago. Yeah. How I ended up dead is kind of a long story. Anyways, I had gone to bed one night and I hadn't been feeling well for a couple of weeks. thought it would go away eventually. I remember feeling confused and somewhat found myself in a dream-like state, although I was pretty lucid in it as well. There was quite a bit of psychedelic-like experiences, and it felt like such a long dream. It just kept on going and going. I didn't have a body anymore, and I actually asked myself, am I dead? Since this couldn't be a dream. Usually when I become aware of dreams I wake up, and I wasn't waking up. It felt like it went on for so long. What was going on? This part I had no recollection of. I guess somewhere or sometime in my sleep I had stopped breathing. I may have had a seizure at some point, and I was pretty lucky family had stopped by the house to check on me. Noticed my car was still in the driveway, which meant I wasn't at work, and I wasn't getting the door. But looking through the window they could see me just laying there in bed not moving. I wasn't responding either, so they went through a window, and I was unresponsive. 911 was called, etc. I believe it took them a couple hours trying to get me back and keep me stable. But my lungs weren't working, so they had to intubate, and I was in a coma with life support, all that fun stuff, for about 2 days. They ran a bunch of tests. I don't remember getting a spinal tap or catheter or all the ives and blood draws, etc. I was still pretty much in the other place for a long time. It felt like I was traveling through space or something. I saw and experienced a lot of amazing things I can't explain or remember well anymore, but I did try to write down some of it later. I wasn't scared. It felt like a really long journey. I didn't necessarily see anyone for a while, but I didn't feel alone. I felt the presence of others. It was like I was around everyone I ever knew or something. It felt quite familiar in a way. There was this black infinite darkness, and it was the most wonderful thing. It was like I could create experience with my imagination. There was no sadness. It was all bliss without worry, and it was very hypnotizing. I really considered letting myself go into it, just letting go. My lungs were not kicking in on their own. If they had not, then I'm told I could stay dead, been paralyzed, or end up a vegetable. I didn't want to let go though. I have a daughter who is my world. She was just about a year old at the time, and I kept thinking of her and her mother. It kept me from just letting go into that peaceful bliss. I couldn't leave them. I did get some of that life flashing before you type of experience. It looked like a projector was cast a bit in front of me, and kind of like a movie, but I didn't see myself or anything like that. What I saw was almost like memories, except I hadn't had these yet. I saw my kiddo and her mom, maybe cause I'd been thinking of them a lot, and they were smiling and happy. My daughter looked a couple of years older in that vision though. There were a few visions, but all I saw was them, and I remember it made me feel quite happy. I rolled, smiled and cried, if that had been possible. After that it was getting quiet and dark. I remember it was all black. I didn't know how to get back. Black, the darkest I've ever seen, and felt so empty. Not scary, but I was in some infinitely large void. Time wasn't really a thing, but I was just sort of there for a good while. I remember seeing a tiny little dot of light so far away, just a little, and it was the only thing different from the blackness. Then I felt I was falling towards it, or being pulled by some force. It felt like I was traveling very fast, like through space again. But it still took quite a long time, and the little thing got larger as I got closer. It was the size of the moon eventually. I just kept falling towards it. Eventually when I got close enough it felt like I was thrown back into myself with really great force. The white was blinding, and as I was back in, all my field of vision was initially incomprehensible, but the light died down, and I was able to make out shapes, etc. I was still comatose. I couldn't move or speak or anything. I saw what looked like a hospital room, and at this point I still was not sure if this was real or not. No way. Nope. This can't be a dream, though they don't last this long and don't feel this real. The world still didn't make sense either. I thought it died and gone to hell or something, and it'd spend eternity trapped in my body, unable to move or do anything. I could hear sounds. I saw a clock on the wall and it'd look over, but the time seemed all wrong, or it would jump around. There was a board on the wall with writing, but it made no sense. A window. Tiny window on the left side, the only window to the outside, but all I could see was a brick wall. And a TV playing some nature stuff that really freaked me out. I couldn't see people for a while, which had me questioning reality. I'd see nurses kinda go past, but they didn't seem real at all. Almost not even three-dimensional, and choppy unrealistic movement. Feet passed by, but it was almost like no one really noticed me. I knew it was real. Well, either I was in the hospital, or I was dead, and in some sort of hell. Everything was becoming more detailed as time went on. I could read the board. People looked a lot more real. I felt the breathing tube, and my arms had been restrained, so I wouldn't tear it out if I woke or something. I still couldn't talk or move, or do anything though. I remember seeing some family and friends asking me to wake up, crying, telling me a lot of things, holding my hand, and I couldn't do anything. That was the worst part for me, seeing how hurt they were. crying and telling me I had to fight, I had to start breathing on my own soon. I couldn't cry. I was trying to yell but nothing. I couldn't grasp their hands. Time was weird. I don't know how much passed, or whatever in between the several moments I remember. I know eventually I was by myself again. A drive came in and I guess I had regained a little movement and my lungs finally kicked in. She took out the breathing tube. It was bugging me when I had started to be able to move a little, and the catheter came out. Didn't feel it. Family was able to come in an hour or two later. I could hardly talk, just barely move hands, arms a little, turn my head a little. I developed the worst migraine I've ever known. Worst pain I felt. And that carried on for about a week non-stop. I got to hold my baby eventually. I have a picture of that somewhere. I don't know where I got the strength, but I picked her up and smiled. Hugged her. After I lost all my strength again. Took a while, but I got to talk to a lot of people and doctors. In the following days etc. Slowly recovering, but in that time I couldn't eat really. I basically had water when possible. I couldn't keep food down for at least a week. Or sleep. I slept once for 30 minutes or so, but I felt the pain all the way through. Probably by day 3 or 4 I was able to start getting up and walk to the bathroom etc. I was hospitalized for about a week before I could go home. This was a year ago. I'm still trying to get past that experience. I suppose I developed PTSD and my anxiety got so bad in the following months going into full-blown agoraphobia. I had insomnia really bad for a while. I still do actually. For about a month I had nightmares about hospitals and feared I'd stop breathing if I fell asleep. Uncontrollable crying and broke down a lot when I had first came to, and for a good while after. I felt guilty because I missed being on the other side and had really considered just letting go into that amazing bliss, that peace. I missed it, and at times, wished I had just stayed there. I left out a lot, but that's all I could get down at the moment. Damn. Worth a read. For real. Felt like a writing prompt, but it's eerie how other people have had similar experiences close to this, or at least it seems to me, when I read these things.